Are you taking videos of the people? That's what you're supposed to be doing.
I'm taking pictures of the outside too.
No, they've already seen the outside.
Oh, okay. So let's just take a girl picture of you, Mom. Hang on. Hi, Mom.
Oh, you don't need to put the light on, do you?
Well, kind of. It was kind of dark.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
That light's like really, you only need the light when it's like totally dark.
Okay. Sorry, Mom. So I'm just letting you know I am enjoying this camera.
Yeah. Did you take this picture?
Yeah, I did. I took that picture and I got a little bit of mostly everybody. Is he in here?
No, he's not here yet.
I'll just take a break really quick.
Did you know everybody?
No, I know most people.
What?
Is everybody from that age?
No, not everybody. It's just mostly me.
This is Levy.
Have you met Diana?
I think we met at one time. Oh, it's been a long time.
Not really.
I didn't know who one. Oh, and Leon.
We met there.
Yeah, I think we were.
Do you think we should?
Oh, I'm one I didn't recognize.
So who's doing your introduction?
No, I don't know. Uncle Harry.
I don't work come this way, Nick.
We met.
Okay.
We met at
Well, that's her husband, Mark.
These are some person from
I'm Diana Garrett's
You've seen her twice.
I met you at your wedding. We met a long time ago. A very long time ago at your wedding. That's the last time, and anyway. And that's what, so as we were talking about.
Let's talk to Cookie over there.
What's Dee Dee saying?
I didn't say anything.
She just got started and then the guy walked in the door, so we sort of started down.
So anyway.
So what are we gonna do? Go
Here's
around
our
the room?
cookie.
Yeah.
Cookie.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's kind of like
Dee Dee's on
you
first.
She started.
Dee Dee's on first.
Dee Dee started, Dee Dee's on
Okay,
first.
go ahead.
Okay, Dee Dee.
Okay, my first memory of Ted was at a family circle picnic a million years ago
Hi, David.
when
How are
we
you?
fell into the creek, and that was the highlight of the picnic. It was the most exciting thing ever at Rocky Park.
How old
That
do you
was the
think he
most
was?
exciting thing. He must have been,
Is that there?
well, I was very small, so
Okay.
maybe he was a teenager, maybe
Teenager.
14 or so. He was big for me.
I mean, you were like small and he was.
Yes. And,
Well, he was
but that was the
good.
highlight. Fishing him out of the
Anybody else with that family circle?
Yeah, we were all, I was in that family circle.
You don't remember that? And this was the highlight of all those picnics. But I think I've seen more in recent years. Then the last
Birthday parties for all three girls.
In
recent years, he seemed so much happier. And since he retired, there are art gallery.
Was there
We had about 65 people there.
I met him at the
And
art
the old
gallery.
timers started to play
writing
cards and we
poetry.
threw against the rules
Together recently.
until something came.
Can you hear her, Nicholas?
I don't know. I can't tell what I'm
Well, can
hearing.
you bring it in closer when the people, can you take it off the tripod and
Oh,
then
yeah.
just sort of be
I just put it
here?
in the tripod and make it look
Okay.
not shaky.
Gary, I hate to tell you this, but we're kind of going around the room and we're just talking about memories of Ted and we're videotaping it so we can share it with Debbie in Israel.
I'll tell you what. Well, holidays aren't gonna be the same if you have another volume. Ted was always at our house for Passover and always at our house for Thanksgiving.
Oh, what's the question?
Of course, we had Rose and Mike.
And Debbie.
And well, Debbie all the time. Ted was always very nice to me. Talking about poetry, art, and music. And we, for years, heard about how he was going to move to Italy and spend a couple of years in Italy.
Yeah.
And he was going to take Italian lessons.
Oh.
But he never did.
Yeah, I know. What time? Did he ever travel to Italy?
Italy a long time ago, but he never went this time around.
He spent a lot of time in Europe.
He lived in
He lived in France a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he spent some time in Europe.
Yeah, he told us once that his happiest years of his life was.
In Paris, I think, wasn't it? In Paris.
And he used to tell me he was jealous because I had everything. Maybe this one. Stacy.
Who's next?
Well, Mark, if you
No, I
got
have
lucky
nothing.
enough to go.
Dee spoke for me.
Okay. Next. Cookie?
Well,
No.
I've only known Ed for a relatively short period, so my recollections are that he loved art and beautiful things, and he delighted in showing us around his apartment, and each thing that he took out was a treasure for him. He enjoyed showing to us. And just turned on a very bright light.
Sorry, it's really shaky back there.
Hey, don't turn on the, we can do it
Yeah,
with the light.
we can't do it with the light.
Okay.
You can just move up.
He particularly liked my salmon that I cooked for the very first time.
Is that when you had him over for dinner?
We had a combination Passover, Easter, or Good Friday dinner, which was a very unusual.
Yeah, we do that too.
Hello, Michelle.
We had, my parents couldn't eat meat, so I
Couldn't.
cooked a turkey and a brisket and chicken soup, but I needed something non-meat, so I made a salmon, and that was the most popular thing at the table. It was the first time I'd ever made it. He liked it a lot. He kept raving about it for a long time afterwards. I don't like salmon, so I really couldn't tell how good it was. He liked it. Michelle, you wanna say
She had the Seder because Betty just got home from the hospital of an operation. And she insisted on doing all this, the chicken soup and the whole ball of wax. And we never will forget that.
Those are matzo balls, not balls.
I knew that one.
Okay, I guess it's my turn now.
There was one moment.
Well, I go way back with Ted. Of course, he was an usher at our wedding.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Me
You know, I
neither.
was thinking of bringing the pictures.
I
and
wish you had. That was wonderful. We'll have to share them some other time. He was an usher at your wedding?
Yeah.
So Manny was in your wedding too?
No, Manny wasn't in the wedding. Ted, Marty Wolf, God, I can't remember. It's been too long.
I'll get the picture.
All right, I'm sorry.
Marty Wolf
Well,
was
anyways,
Marty Nation.
ultimately I became a federal auditor in savings and loans, and I used to do a lot of work in Baltimore. And on occasion, I was doing Loyola Federal at the time, and I called him up. The weather was bad, and he insisted that I come over and stay with him and all this. But I said, no, I can get home, and I went home. But whenever I got into Baltimore, I always called him. And then I joined the Savings Loan in Baltimore. And it was then that he was going with Nancy. And he invited Betty and I to his wedding. And I never will forget it. He had this chuppah that he had maids. And
No, Herschel made him bring it. He borrowed it from the shul.
oh, is that what it was?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Let's get the story straight now.
Yeah.
No, Herschel made
It's way
him.
back.
Herschel made him bring it, and Herschel borrowed it from the shul, and then he took
And
it back.
Manny and Bernice was there. And then, after that, he was married a few years. He lived in Bolton Hill. And he had the knack of acquiring all these antiques. His house was just beautiful. And they had a parrot named McGuire, was it? McGurk. And he had a cat. And
And when they got divorced, Nancy got the parrot, and we got the cat. And we kept that cat for 17 years.
But I represented him in his divorce. I went to his
No, the black
lawyer
one's spooky.
and all this. And Betty and I, Mike and Rose, and Pet Perlmutter, we all went to Israel. And Pet's girlfriend, Daisy, from Texas. And
It's not Ted.
you lost my phone.
Sorry.
Oh, I know what it was. And then from there we went to Amsterdam for a week. And then Gary met us at National Airport, and he said to him, wasn't it awful? Did you hear the news about Manny? And we didn't know, when we left him, Manny was there, he was concerned about Ted, and that's all. So we got the shock of our life. We didn't know that he died of a heart attack while swimming in Israel. So I felt sorry for Ted, and I got a fifth of Tanqueray gin. I knew he always liked that. So I went over there one night and kept him company, and he really appreciated me coming over, sitting with him. And I told him his brother was very concerned about him and always wanted me to keep an eye on him. And I always called him, even the times when he wouldn't talk to me on the phone, or I'd go there 20 miles and bring a bottle of wine, and he would say, "You're my cousin." Before I sat down, he says, "You can go home now." Okay? So I looked around, and I knew anything could come out of his mouth. And I said, "Gee, that's a good idea, but how about if I just have a glass of wine with you, and then I'll leave?" But I never got mad at him. I'd go there and I have lunch with him and all this, and that's the way he was, that's all. But he was a brilliant person, and he loved getting involved with people. He really did. And there's so many things that he did, and so many courses that he would take in school. And he had close friends who kept up with him, really. And I don't know who they were, really. But somebody has his telephone book, and I'm sure that would show. I guess I took enough time.
No problem. We have 2 tapes.
There's not a time limit. I mean,
Okay, next.
There's no time limit on memories, I guess.
I think I was trying to think a lot about Ted. He was my best friend when I was growing up. He actually was the closest cousin to my age. It was Ted, and then Marty Wolf, and then Mike, of the boy cousins. My family moved to Rittenhouse Street Northwest at a time when that was a 5th and Rittenhouse near Coolidge High School, for those of you who don't know where it is. And that was a brand new neighborhood. It was not a Jewish neighborhood at all. And there were no synagogues in close proximity. So for the high holidays, we always went to Herschel and Puba's. That's Ted's father and mother's. It was at North Capitol and K Street, where Uncle Harry had his hardware store. And I can't even tell you how old I was. I don't remember. I was probably 6 or 7 or even less than that.
We used to walk to the synagogue from
We
their house.
all walked to the synagogue. Puba was a wonderful cook, a fabulous pastry chef. I mean, the strudel, I never tasted anything so delicious in my whole life. And Puba was diabetic.
I never knew that.
She was not supposed to eat it, but
I didn't. I never
oh
knew
yes,
that.
one of the biggest problems was for the holidays, she would do massive amounts of food because we were all there. And then she would do the baking, and then she would get into the baking, and then sometimes she would be sick after that. But I loved being there because Ted loved to do everything that I loved to do. I mean, if I learned to knit, Ted wanted to learn to knit. If I did some kind of embroidery, he was truly interested in it, even if he couldn't do it or whatever. If I wanted to play with paper dolls, which is what girls played with in those days, he would put up with me. He really would. He was very, very tolerant. I guess when we got older, we still kept in touch. Our families were very close. I hesitated when my mother would say we were going over to visit Uncle Herschel because Uncle Herschel was a pincher. A pincher. And
Any of us would have felt that.
he didn't just pinch.
Wait a minute.
He twisted.
Nicholas, you know who you're talking about? You're talking about your great-grandfather.
Okay.
Okay. You had to catch him up there for
I
a
would
minute.
start
Great-grandfather
crying
Richardson?
before we ever got there because
Okay.
I knew how much it was going to hurt, but it was a mixed bag. I wanted to go because I wanted to play with Ted, but I didn't want to go because, oh my God, I can still remember what that felt like. And it was a form of endearment. I mean, I really believe he wasn't out to get us. This was
He wasn't the kissing kind.
No.
And he'd also give you a ride on his
Feet.
foot.
On his leg.
I remember the bouncing up and down at the same time.
But you got, he held on here. That's exactly right. That was really tough. I think my next memory for Ted skips over. He went to Catholic U, he was in Chicago for a while, he was in Europe for a while. Then when he came back, I was all grown up, I was working, I had to be 21 or so years old. Ted was living in New York. Ted was starving. I hardly call it living, he was starving. He would never let me see where he was living, but when I would come to New York and come to a hotel, he would come and stay with me, and of course I was working, I could afford for us to do fun things. So, you know, he would be my guest to go to the theater, and whatever problems I was having with male friends at that time, Ted was always there because he was my shoulder to lean on. That's it. I'll pass to you now.
You can just take a moment, please.
When I came into the family,
Nope, I fixed it.
Okay.
sorry, the red eye is watching me.
It doesn't mean you're on a timer, though.
No, when I came into the family, Ted was still, you know, a young boy. And it's hard to remember my association with him at that time. I remember him more later when he liked my daughter so much. And he liked to be at any family festivity where we were. And I think he liked me a lot. He told me I was his favorite aunt, and I believed him. Why not? But I think it was real neat about that hardware store, because the back door of the store was practically the back door of the house where they lived. They both met in the rear like that. And that was very interesting to me. And Ted, you know, lived in so many different places that I really was out of touch with him, except when there was a family simcha. And there were quite a few weddings and bar mitzvahs. There were no bat mitzvahs in those days. But I always liked to be in his company because he talked my language and I spoke his language. I got along with him. Later on, he used to call and ask me about the family, and I told him where Dee Dee was, and she was out of town for a long time. And he liked to hear what was doing. And that's about it. I don't remember being terribly close to him, but there was a warm feeling between us.
You want it cold or warm?
That's 30.
Cold or just warm? Warm? No, it's not warm, it's room temperature.
I really don't have that many great experiences with Ted. I used to see him at the family simchas, bar mitzvahs, weddings, I should say. And once in a while I'd see him outside at Manny's. We used to talk, discuss a little politics, and that's about the extent of my relationship with Ted. But I always thought he was a real nice guy. Oh, and another thing, he used to, whenever we were at a simcha, he'd say, "Come on, let me buy you a drink." And we'd both walk to the bar together. Walk up to the bar. Sports. Yeah, do sports.
Yeah. Well, of course, Ted and I have always felt very, very close. He was 3 months older than me. My most vivid memory of him when we were very, very young was roller skating at Truxton Circle. He always threw me in the water. In the water. He always knocked me in. I took a lot of hard knocks from Ted when we were growing up. He was always knocking me down. But we were very close. Like I said, he was practically part of our family, all our family dinners. Ted always came to him. As Martin said, he was the usher at our wedding. And when they got divorced, Martin stood up for one and I represented the other. I mean, we were both there for when they got married, and then when they got divorced, I was a witness for, I can't remember if I was a witness for Nancy or for Ted, and Martin was a witness for the other one when they got the divorce. They stayed very good friends.
She was a very lovely
She was
person.
very nice, yeah.
She was in the nursing profession.
How long were they married? About?
Not very
Not
long.
very long, I don't think, was it in,
I don't know.
couple of years?
Couple of
yeah.
years.
I think because the cat was only a couple of years old.
Well, the cat went to the farm first.
Yeah, and then he went and got the cat back because the people
Because the
in the
cat-
farm weren't taking good care of it.
Yeah,
so-
the cat used to eat the corn of the cob.
That's right, the ate that, I never saw a cat that
They
loved
never
corn on
fed
the
the cat
cob.
at the farm.
Whenever we had corn on the cob, I had to make a piece for the cat, and the cat, he ate all the corn off the cob.
She.
It really, yeah. Ted brought the cat to me, and he said, "Could I keep it a couple of days?"
I
He
remember
found a home.
he had a cute little dog at one time, I remember.
Oh,
Then
we
they
had
had a little Shih Tzu.
Yeah.
A cute little dog.
Yeah.
Tiger.
I remember
Yeah, but he
coming
couldn't
back
leave the
now.
cat with me for a couple of days till he found a home for it. The cat stayed 17 years.
Aw.
Yeah, I remember him.
I was mad at Ted when he was in the hospital and I went to see him. He was supposed to stay well. He was going to go with me. We were both going to go up to New York. I've never been to the cloisters in New York. I've done almost all the other museums, but I've never gotten up there. And he was going to go with me. He promised me. After he got out of the hospital and got his strength back, we were going to go. Only he cheated me.
We did that together. I had never been there either, and he took me there.
He did take you, so
Yeah,
he cheated
I
me.
had
I
never
got
seen,
cheated.
I had never seen so many tapestries in my entire life. And of course, Ted was so knowledgeable about it. I mean, he knew
Yeah.
exactly how they were woven, when they were woven, how they got to the cloisters and all that. So,
Oh, one of the best things with Ted is, we used to go a lot of times, we'd meet and go downtown to the museums downtown, the art gallery. And again, Ted was so knowledgeable, he would explain a lot of stuff. Oh, the last time I went with Ted, as a matter of fact, was when they reopened up the Freer Gallery. And we went to see the Peacock Room. And it was amazing, the things Ted knew, about that room, the construction of it, the trouble the artist had with the owners when it was first when commissioned. That was the last time he and I spent together. And then we'd go over to the east wing of the art gallery, to the Terrace Cafe, and have lunch up there. So he cheated me out of my trip to New York.
Well, he may have knocked you down, but he never knocked me down. And I remember a lot when I was a teenager, and he was a little bit older, and Betty was around too, and on Sundays, we used to roam around downtown, the Smithsonian, all the art galleries in the Smithsonian, and they used to be so cruel to me because I wanted to go into the Walter Reed Medical Museum. And you had to be 16, I believe, at that time in order to get in. And they kept laughing at me because I couldn't go in because I wasn't.
Shirley makes up these terrible stories. I mean,
It's true.
she keeps coming up with all these horrible stories about when we were young.
Well,
It's true, you still need to
they
be 16 to
tormented
get into
me.
the hospital.
Betty particularly tormented.
And
me.
the older she gets, the worse the stories
So
get.
this is where they had all the
We
stuff
used to
in
go
it.
to see
Yeah, I know.
musicals together
Right.
a lot, and I remember one in particular many years ago called Stairway to Heaven with David Niven. You remember that movie, anybody?
I remember.
You remember that
Oh,
movie?
yeah.
Okay, and that was at the Columbia Theater on F Street. And we used to stop for ice cream sodas a lot when we were downtown, so you all like that.
Go to Reese's? The Reese's and also the Mayflower Donut
Mayflower
Shop.
Donut Shop.
Ah,
is more
remember
fun.
that one?
And Peoples used to make a good ice cream soda.
The donut shop.
It was the Mayflower Donut Shop. Yeah. Yeah, I went there a lot of times.
And Wiley's. Hey, Martin, it's just come. You remember that one night we were at Wiley's with Manny?
He ate the wash tub.
What?
I
Ate the whole
They had
wash
a
tub.
They called it a wash tub.
It was a wash
Do you
tub.
remember that?
I remember that.
And I sat there in disbelief.
Is it like a trough still?
Yeah,
It's
an
a
old
tub.
wash
It's a
tub.
great big
An old
tub.
tin wash tub. And they filled it with ice cream.
And his
all
father
kinds of
is eating this thing, and I'm sitting there. I still see it.
Well, the theory was if you ate
If you
that,
ate
Yeah,
the
it's
whole
supposed
thing,
to
you
get,
get another
yeah,
one.
you
I'm
it's free, that's
what
right.
went into that.
maybe, I don't know. I thought it was free, I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
No,
if
I
you-
wasn't
no,
free.
if you finished the whole wash tub, then you didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
There was no one
And nobody,
person for that.
nobody, well, that's it, nobody
No.
could help you eat it. You had to eat it all by yourself. And Manny got very, very close to it, but he couldn't finish it. I remember
I had to pay
that.
for it.
No, looks like it's up to Bob.
Okay, one moment.
With me in regards to the time when she went to New York, and he was always there for her, and he would show her the finer points of New York and what there was to see. I guess the way I would sum up Ted, through my eyes, is that I've never seen someone as enthusiastic about anything that he decided to undertake. If it was a group of players who were doing dramatics, or somebody doing poetry, or if it was an art group, he really undertook to do it with all his might. And I remember one time he invited Cookie and I to attend a group that was down the Arts Club, and we went down to this beautiful home downtown, Hell or something like that, one of their streets, and they had this group that was doing a performance, and then afterwards Ted and the rest of them prepared a meal, and we all sat down and ate together and everything else. But I think that Ted had to be the type of person who not only had a lot of good friends, but must have been a very good friend to them, because the people that he knew always seemed to care an awful lot about him. We shared a little time that I've known him, some very, very good times together.
I remember Ted, of course, as being older than I, and I was never really close to him when I was that young. But of course, I remember him at family affairs. But I think we really became much closer after Eddie died, and he would call me and ask me to meet him for concerts. That must have been his concert stage, and he introduced me to this wonderful building, so wonderful that I can't think of the name of it, where the statue of Einstein
Back
is.
behind Einstein.
National Academy of
Yes, and we would meet, thank you, God, I haven't been there in a while, and we would meet there for concerts, and they had beautiful gardens outside, and we would walk around and see this statue of Einstein that I particularly liked, and he would come over for lunch and bring Tiger, his little dog. I remember on Groton Road we would sit in the back and have lunch, and he invited me to lunch at his house. And I remember he made tuna fish, and it was so good, tuna fish salad. And I said, "What do you have in here that makes it so good?" And it was water chestnuts. He told me he used water chestnuts instead of celery because he didn't have to buy a whole stalk of celery. Isn't that funny, the things you remember? But it was really good. I was very impressed. And of course, he had a beautiful yard, and he enjoyed looking at my yard. In those days, it looked pretty
I have
good.
to tell you something. You mentioned Tiger.
Yes.
And when we went to see him the last time in the hospital, he was telling me he felt very good at the time because he had asked the vet to put Tiger to sleep.
I was just going to...
Oh, were you going to?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I didn't know you knew.
No, and some friends of his
They took
who owned a store nearby.
They always kept Tiger every time he went to the hospital.
Yes,
they
they
kept
said they
Tiger
would
for him.
take him,
And so
and
when
he-
he told them he was going to put Tiger to sleep, they said no, they're going to keep him.
Yeah, so he felt
Tiger's
really
got a
good
good
about
home.
that. Yes, yes.
Of course, Tiger's no baby either.
No, I was not. And then after I met Leon, we went to some of those concerts together and met Ted downtown. And of course we saw Ted, about a week before he died. And he was talking about literature and, he didn't want us to leave. He recommended some good books for us to read, and we talked about music and it was a good day for him.
He was into photography towards the end too.
Oh, yeah, this marvelous picture of Betty on the wall. I don't know if anybody ever saw.
At the hospital?
No, this was at his house.
She went to the house.
And he said to me, "Do you know who this is? I just had this picture, or recently had this picture made, I guess from a smaller snapshot, and it was colorized and beautiful. And of course I knew right away who it was. And
I
of
didn't
course,
know that was you.
I hadn't seen Betty.
When I was staring at the
in
picture, I didn't want to embarrass
No.
myself by saying,
I
No,
didn't
his
know
sister.
Betty, his
Was
sister
his
Betty.
sister.
Yeah.
It's his sister. No.
me like Betty Wolf.
Yeah. But it's
Never
a
mind.
Bordeaux.
picture. I mean, it is just
beautiful. Alan's mother.
Alan's mother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Betty Ford?
No, and then she married Ed,
Tepper.
Tepper, yeah, Betty
Well,
Tepper.
see, that makes me feel a whole lot better about Ted and Betty when knowing that that's her, because that is a very loving, beautiful picture. Oh, it's gorgeous. I had no idea who that was. And I believe now that I think
It's a
that's
cutout of a
something,
bigger picture.
or something. It was just beautiful.
I went to the hospital to see him the last time. Well, that wasn't my last time. I went with Betty for an
Put
over
that
an
up
hour.
there.
But there was a black professor
Put it
there
up there and just.
who did a rendering of Betty Bordeaux. And he was so thrilled to have it. He was so thrilled that this professor would come to see him at the hospital that he got out of the bed and put it on his door. He had a door, I guess, to the bathroom or something. And there was this large photograph, or however he did, of his sister.
Yeah, well, the one I saw is gorgeous. Well, it was so nice of you to make that photograph too. That was blown up from a little snapshot. And when my
You get a picture of the photograph?
father could not.
Yeah, I did. I got one already.
That is fantastic, isn't it, Shirley?
At the home, and my father was still able to really recognize things. And I know he knew.
And you know, that's going back what?
That's 1938. 38, I understand. But what I love is the family resemblance.
55,
Most
58.
people who look at it think that's Alan, and that's Manny, but that's Harry. That's Harry. As a much younger man, and the little boy is Ted. But he went to the trouble of blowing it up this large so that my father could see the faces. It's not an easy thing to do. That's
He learned a computer technique. This is not
Yes.
done with regular,
Oh,
the
yeah,
old-fashioned
yeah.
photographic enlargement. It's
Special.
done with a special art
when I met
and
your father,
computer
he was like,
combination technique. And the person
Come up in the
that did
Greyhound bus
Betty's
from
picture
Florida.
for
Did I ever
him
tell you the story?
was someone that either taught him how to do it,
Come
or
on.
took the course with him.
Well, yes,
Yes, I believe he did that himself. But it's not, it's computer somehow or other. It's tricky. It's a number of different stages.
Here, Gary, can you see this?
No, I don't.
Hello, Lynn.
You might
Oh, I don't have much to say about Ted because I only knew him 3 years.
I heard.
But a year after I met Grady, about 1992, she started telling me about this cousin of hers who liked to go to concerts with her. And so pretty soon we went to, I think maybe 2.
Yeah, and the reception and all that.
And then a little bit after that, I noticed he wasn't calling her about going to concerts. We were wondering whether he was feeling a little like I was
You were
intruding
proud
on
of
his
him.
territory or
You were
something.
proud of him.
Yeah. And we didn't go there anymore. But he kept telling us about Marine concerts at George Mason. Didn't we go to any George Mason once? The Marine band would play at George Mason. We went there once, but then it kind of dropped off. But he certainly was pretty knowledgeable artistic. You know, in all kinds of fields of art and literature, sure. That's what I read. I wish I'd had more conversations with him. He was probably...
Well, you know, one time when he was working at the National Cathedral, Washington Cathedral, and he had tickets. Somebody gave him tickets to for a tour through it, and he took me with him on the tour through there. It was very interesting. I mean, he was interested in so many things. You know, art, music, drama. He had an awful lot of interest.
I was kind of hoping that Deborah, our daughter, would come by. Did she say she was going to come by?
She can't hardly talk.
Oh, she has laryngitis. She's
She
not
can't
feeling
talk.
well. But anyway, Ted went through a bicycling stage.
Oh.
And Deborah at that time was working part-time at some bicycle shop down on
Big wheels.
near Capitol Hill. And Ted decided that that was going to be the physical activity that he was really going to get into. So he went down, and Deborah loved it because he bought everything that wasn't nailed down. Because, you know, like Bob said, when Ted went in for something, he really went into it wholeheartedly. And he and Deborah actually went biking together a few times. Oh, and I have to tell you, Lisa, he started calling our daughter Lisa, who lives up in Frederick, because he knew that Lisa, when she lived in Vermont, became interested in sailing. And Ted decided he was going to take sailing lessons, Did he ever tell you this?
No.
Oh, yeah. He was going to take, well, Lynn knows, he's going to take sailing lessons, and he wanted to tap the resources of Lisa so that they could go sailing together. And I have to tell you, Lisa was terribly disappointed because Ted didn't finish the course. And you had to take so many classes, and then you had to have an examination or something. And Lisa kept nudging him. When are you going to finish the course so we can go sailing? So.
At first, he was owning him, and there was one thing that he didn't complete.
Absolutely.
I think it's like excelling.
Yeah. I think he was a little bit afraid, because, you know, that's difficult.
Was he that good a swimmer? I don't even know.
Well, he fell into that creek and came out.
I was just starting to
He must have been quite a swimmer.
Another thing about Ted, last year was it Pesach that he was over at our house. He had joined a poetry group, and he brought along a little book of poetry that they had published. They had just published, and he gave all of us a copy of it.
And I wanted to bring it tonight, and I forgot. You know, when I called cousin Martin Wolf, I first called him when Ted became ill this last time, and Martin said that Ted and he had gotten really close in the last couple of years. They'd begun corresponding, and they were making long-distance telephone calls to one another. And Martin was always a beautiful writer. As a matter of fact, you remember Martin was here as a speechwriter when...
That was his
yeah, I think for President Johnson. He came here back to Washington at that time. And when Ted started with the poetry group, he felt that it was really important for him to tap the resources of Martin, and he wanted to share his poetry. So he was sending, I guess, the issues every month to Martin. And
You know, you're the only person I've ever heard call him Martin.
instead of Marty?
Mm-hmm. I have never heard anyone call him Martin. Good for you. That sounds much better. He's always been Marty, and everybody I've ever known has called him Marty.
I think I call him Marty sometimes too. But they spoke on the telephone as recently as about a week before Ted died. And I don't know whether everybody knew or not, but people friends were coming out of the woodwork to visit Ted, friends that I never knew existed. And the people who came to visit him from the poetry group were really an odd lot, I have to tell you. I mean, they all had something in common, but they were a really odd group to look at. But
what do you mean
odd?
Look at.
Draw a picture.
Their looks, evidently.
Well, they looked eccentric. They were all very eccentric. Very soft-spoken, very kind, but they were a really eccentric group. But there was one person named Jean that Ted had gotten very close to. When he spoke to Jean on the telephone after he became ill, it was very, very important for him that his last poetry endeavor would be published in the following month booklet, which I guess should be coming out any time now. Marty Wolf was aware of it, and he specifically said, as Gary did, that he wanted to receive the last issue. This woman, Jean, came over to the house and rummaged through Ted's notebook and took the most recent work so that it would be published in the book, in the library's booklet this month. So I would imagine Brian will probably get a copy.
I would imagine, but I wouldn't get one.
Anybody want?
I think...
In his address book, and actually in the kitchen, hanging on the wall, is the names and addresses of all the poetry people. And I'm sure they would be happy for you to have it. Marty would like to have it. I know Gary would like to have it. So. Well, I think we'd all, like to have it because I think Ted put this together after he knew that he wasn't going to make it, and I think it might be something we would all like to have.
Well, I've been in touch with KC, who's the, and I've told her that it's our wish, the family's wish, that we're allowed to go into the house and at least get Ted's personal papers and things that we know that are only going to mean something to the family, pictures, papers, letters, and that if we could just go in and do that, we're not, and then she could, whatever, but that would be really important, because I'm not quite sure from this point on, she said she's not sure how they're going to exactly handle it. But that's off the point. I came into this family in a very different way. And it was a very interesting way that I met Ted. At the time when I met Brian and we were having a relationship, well, no, we weren't married, and I was pregnant with Nicholas, and Brian's father was not very well, and so we decided we weren't going to do Helen's parents right away. So whenever we go over to his parents' house, I have to leave my coat on. And I'm very heavy now, but at that time I wasn't that heavy, and Bernice would always say, have you, she would confide to Brian that maybe I was on a little bit on the heavy side, and this went on. But Ted was there one day, and I'd never met him before, and he walked up to me, he put his arm around me, and he said, "You're coming into the family, aren't you?" And he looked directly at my stomach, and he walked away. And that was the first time I met Ted. And it was a welcome. It was a welcome. It was a real welcome, and that's how it always was. And when Nicholas was born, it was a very joyous thing. And Ted brought us, which we still have and will always have. He had a plate and a cup and a bowl hand-thrown with Nicholas's name and his date of birth in a child-sized cup. And we have one for Nicholas and we have one for Aaron. And I don't know, it was a very up and down and different relationship over the past 15 years. I made a decision 3 years ago that I felt that Brian was sort of, I didn't think I made this in a mean way, but I felt that Brian needed to be more connected with his uncle, and that if I backed out of the relationship, Brian would be forced to sort of deal with Ted on a one-on-one basis. So besides talking to him on the telephone, taking the kids over there for a night of Hanukkah, I always made sure that Ted had one of my opera tickets. He always enjoyed that so much. He was always so, he just loved opera, and I always gave him an opera ticket. He was always grateful about that. So we hadn't really spoken that much in the past 6 or 7 months, but when I went and walked into his room a week ago, or just right after he came home, the look on his face was like that look when I first met him. It was so full of family and so full of, "You're here, I'm so happy you're here," and it was just like nothing had ever happened, and it meant a lot to me, it really did. And during the next 36 hours, I spent a lot of time with Ted, doing what I thought he'd like. We spent a lot of time looking at art books. I'd show him art books, and his facial expression would change. But you all know how much he loved art, so him being able for me to hold the art books up. I read stories to him and things like that, but it was a very moving time for me, and I'm very happy I had that time. And I think that we get to be last.
But don't forget me.
Okay, Nick, go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you ought to, okay, I was just going to say, turn the TV.
Well, I was with Ted for a very short time near the end. I was kind of more of the type that when Casey brought his boombox here, I started marching to the music and started slapping my dad's face. And this is what probably touched me the most is the way he was telling me like how he planned to do so many things with me during the summer, plant through his garden. And those roses he was planting, they were really, they smelled organic, like some very strong perfume, I guess. And the last time I saw him he was on his hospital bed, and he had his hand on my head, put thoughts in my head, and then felt pretty warm, very warm thoughts. And he definitely showed me a lot in art-wise. I guarantee you I won't forget this guy.
That's very nice.
Actually, part of what I'll never forget is when Nicholas was with Ted, and twice Ted caught him staring, trying to figure it out, and Ted went, "Ugh," and Nicholas goes, right back at it.
I do this. I do that all the time when something tries when something I can't understand. I just go.
Yeah, he did more than that. It was a weird interaction.
No.
I was actually what I remember first. Ted was like my sister wrote, and we have the letter around here somewhere, I think.
Yes, we have the letter.
My sister wrote a really nice letter to Ted that he got while he was home, because he went to the hospital, he came home, and then he couldn't really swallow anymore, so he went back into the hospital. And she said that he was basically the one who influenced us, my family. We didn't have much art. My father wasn't artistic. He could do things like that, but he didn't go out and look at art and music. You know, their tastes were like very different than Ted's. So Ted was always my sensory teacher. My sisters as well. And one of the things I remember, which was most incredible, when I was in Philadelphia at Drexel, he came up and stayed at one of those fancy hotels that was the kind of thing I would never think of staying at. And he took me out to this place, it was Arthur's, I'm not sure the name of the place, and you know, ordered me a filet. I think it melted in my mouth, and I said no. You know, and so he sent it back.
Oh! Okay, can we pause for a moment? I have to change the tape.
Yeah.